Loaded with incendiary bombs, planes could now deliver fire on an unprecedented scale.
Fire can destroy things. So using incendiary bombs, you could take out and wipe out large areas with very little effort.
During World War II, both the Allied and Axis powers discovered that fire was the simplest, most effective way to bring an enemy to its knees. At the start of the war, the U.S. Army Air Force had attempted to use precision bombing raids to take out specific military and industrial targets. By dropping high explosive ordnance on their enemies' nerve centers, they had hoped to render them powerless. But the strategy had problems.
In the American Air Force, they had a thing called the Norden Bomb Sight, and you could hit the bottom of a pickle barrel at 22,000 feet. The problem is, they tested that in Arizona. It's very clear in Arizona. In Europe, most of the time, you don't get the weather to use the Norden Bomb Sight.
Flying at 20,000 feet in poor weather conditions made it difficult to put bombs on target. To make an accurate hit, raids had to be carried out in broad daylight, and that proved almost suicidal.
The problem is that it took a lot of bombers, a lot of sorties, and a lot of dead American airmen to try to carry that out. So it was a difficult process. The alternative was nighttime bombing and to do area bombing. It was less precise. It was aimed at urban centers. If you happen to get industrial targets, all the better. And it was designed to terrify the citizenry.
Bombing at night was safer, but rendered targeting systems useless. The Germans came up with a solution. They began to develop small cluster incendiary bomblets that would burn vigorously, causing mass destruction without the need for accurate targeting.
This is a German 1 kilogram magnesium bomblet from an incendiary bomb. There would be about 260 of these bundled together. They'd disperse in the air and fall over a large target area. They would have been filled with magnesium, which would have ignited the thermite, which would then burn at an intense temperature.
During the autumn of 1940, Germany launched a sustained firebombing campaign over London. More than 1 million incendiary bombs were dropped in the first 2 months, destroying over 1 million buildings. The US and British military retaliated and began to fight fire with fire.
This bomblet was dropped over Calais in 1940. The British recovered it and then sent it to the United States so that the US military could study it. And the Americans came up with their own magnesium cluster bomb. This shape was so that you could bundle hundreds of these together and drop them over a target. And actually would also have a fin assembly so that it wouldn't just tumble in the air, but also maybe drop a little bit more accurately.
On impact, a spring-loaded fuse ignited the magnesium, which in turn lit the thermite mixture, creating scorching, melting fire. The Allies began experimenting with other incendiary materials to destroy man and machine. The result, white phosphorus.
White phosphorus is a very simple chemical. It's just good old phosphorus, but once it gets burning, it doesn't stop. It was initially used to create a thick white smoke on the battlefield. But if you happen to get a fragment of that white phosphorus on anything, a piece of wood, a piece of grass, or a piece of human being, it keeps burning and doesn't stop. If you've got a piece of white phosphorus burning its way into your buddy's flesh, the only way to save your buddy is to take your bayonet and carve that piece of phosphorus out of his body, and you've got to do it right away before it kills him.
Laden with white phosphorus and thermite bombs, the US and British Air Forces began torching German cities. On February 15, 1945, British and American Air Forces attacked Dresden. First, dropping regular explosives to blow the roofs off, the Allied planes rained down 2,000 pounds of incendiary bombs on the city. Within hours, Dresden was engulfed in a raging firestorm.
A firestorm is a fire that is burning completely out of control, that is feeding on itself, that is creating such an incredible updraft in the center of the fire that it's causing the fire to spread further and further across the city.
A firestorm is created as the heat from the original fire draws in the surrounding air. This creates an updraft and causes the inflowing winds to change direction erratically, spreading the fire and feeding its force. As temperatures reached 2,700 degrees, over 50% of Dresden was destroyed, with around 40,000 casualties. Fire had revealed its awesome destructive capabilities. But moved forward just a few weeks, and the flames had risen to new heights as fire hit Japan's capital.
Entire cities are consumed not just by the incendiary bombs themselves, but by their very own building materials. Tokyo, for instance, largely a wooden city, made itself into its own funeral pyre when it was set alight by American incendiary bombs.
In July 1944, Major General Curtis LeMay was placed in control of the 21st Bomber Command and given the job of winning the Pacific War at all costs. Earning the nickname Bombs Away LeMay, he believed that carpet firebombing was the answer.
LeMay's marching orders: win the victory in Japan at all cost. And he did.
Starting in March 1945, LeMay began to rain down a torrent of fire on Tokyo and other Japanese cities. 6,960 B-29 sorties were flown over Japan, dropping a total bomb load of 41,592 tons. Tokyo suffered the worst. In one raid, over 150,000 Japanese civilians were killed or wounded, and 16 square miles of the city was destroyed.
What happened was the bombers were flying down a line, and they would drop their incendiaries down a line, and they got a line of fire going, and the wind was very strong that night. So there was this sweeping effect across the area, and there were more people killed in that raid than there were in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
As incendiary bombing created towering infernos across the globe, both Allied and Axis powers experimented with ways to deliver mass flaming carnage. The Japanese manufactured balloon bombs, hoping they'd be blown across the Pacific by wind currents and set the U.S. on fire.
The Japanese scientists came up with an idea of putting up a bunch of helium-filled balloons with little bombs on them, and they floated them across the Pacific to blow up pieces of the United States. And some of them actually got as far as California, and some of them even got to Nevada.
The balloon bombs were 30 feet in diameter, filled with 19,000 cubic feet of hydrogen. Each balloon had 30 pounds of incendiary material suspended beneath it. 300 of the 9,000 Japanese balloons landed in the U.S. The American government were so afraid the bombs would affect morale that they kept it secret, and the Japanese stopped the campaign believing that the mission had failed completely. While the Japanese experimented with fire balloons to create mass destruction, the U.S. were developing their own secret weapon, the bat bomb. Louis Pfizer, the inventor of napalm, began working on the possibility of an incendiary carrying bat.
Pfizer came up with another idea in which he would load bats up with incendiary devices and drop them over Japan, and they would fly down and roost in Japanese homes and burn up Japan.
Unfortunately, the bats didn't play ball. $2 million later, the project was folded.
The big problem with the flaming bat is that a bat with an incendiary device can go pretty much anywhere. And there were a lot of accidents during development with flaming bats burning barns down all over the countryside in California. The bat burning research was abandoned when it was discovered that a nuclear bomb could actually deliver the flaming Japanese city concept way better than bats could.
In the 20th century, incendiary weapons have caused apocalyptic destruction, reducing men, machines, and entire cities to ash and vapor. The effects of flamethrowers, napalm, and thermite bombs were terrifying.